Hello and welcome to Hopeful Conversations. I'm Vicky Montague and today I'm joined by Clare Downham. Clare is the professed Queen of Calm and I am delighted to have her on the show. I guess I've known of you for quite a few years and we haven't actually connected. I don't think we actually connected until we were in Spain together in November at an event called Viva. Give it a little plug. And I think you came to one of the talks that I did around physical health. And afterwards, you were saying that you'd had lots of experiences of various diagnoses over the last few years in particular, and how I guess your experience of those has altered. And so, yeah, I was curious to kind of hear more about that. And I thought, well, what better way of doing that than to invite you here and to share that with people who also might like to hear about it. So over to you, really. I'd love to know, what have you been told you have? What experiences have you had? And where are you at with that? Like what's going on?
Oh gosh, I mean, have we got all day? Just getting a list of my labels out and we'll
Yeah.
I guess I'm trying to think really where I kind of started to develop this sense of myself as having things wrong with me. And I suspect probably from quite young. I think my first real big experience of being sick was I had a lot of urinary tract infections when I was quite little, and I still get them sometimes now. And I ended up under the hospital and, all sorts of tubes stuck up places you wouldn't want to have a tube stuck up and all sorts of things. I don't know, maybe if it started there, but I definitely remember later on in life, maybe in my, probably in my 30s, well, no, in my 20s, actually, coming across gluten intolerance as being a thing for me. And that did seem to make sense at the time, probably still does a bit now, that when I ate wheat, I seemed to bloat up quite badly. And then going through other phases with food, a lot of stuff around food you can't eat, food you can eat. So definitely been told about a lot of food intolerances. I've had blood tests and things like that over the years. And at one point, no deadly nightshade. At one point, no pulses. At one point, like literally never really being in a place where I felt like I could eat anything.
Yeah.
There's some things I choose not to eat for moral and other reasons, but that there's never been a time, I don't think, since probably my 20s, that I've actually thought, oh yeah, I could just go somewhere and eat whatever I fancy eating within the bounds of my own kind of moral compass. But that's always been a thing. But I guess the big thing really that kind of brought everything together and made it all into a bigger thing was the burnout they experienced in 2015 when I was a primary school head teacher. So I just went to work one day. I was pretty knackered really and exhausted, and I took one look at my computer and just walked out of work and never went back really. And at that point I felt like my body moved me to go lie down on the sofa and not do very much I was off work for a year. And that kind of peak, I'd already kind of been interested in complementary therapy. I've never been very into medication and the Western medical system. I've always been alternative stuff. But I do think that can also take you down a bit of a rabbit hole, or maybe several different rabbit holes, because I discovered that it was my adrenals that were tired out, I guess. And then off the back of that, they said that this is more about functional medicine. So I was having blood tests and having things tested, but it was all more on a functional medicine basis because I wasn't going to go down the Western route anyway. But then the functional medicine person I was speaking to then said, you've got underactive thyroid as well. I'd always suspected that. I always have cold hands and feet, so that seemed to make sense. But then in the mix of all that, the menopause became a thing, apparently, because I was the right age and I had the symptoms, some of which are the same as the underactive thyroid symptoms, interestingly. So then food came into the picture even more, I think, at that point. There's always been a big thing around food and which foods are right and which foods are wrong. So I then did an autoimmune protocol, which is the most strict thing you can ever do in your life.
Yeah.
I mean, thank God my fiance is an ex-chef, so at least he was, you know, quite good at creating things out of nothing, because basically when you're not autoimmune breast cancer, there's virtually nothing you can actually eat. I don't know if it helped or not. I don't really know. And at one point I was very caught up in, my mornings have always been the most tricky part of the day for me. So going through burnout and you know, adrenal fatigue. So I the mornings were always ropey. I would wake up feeling very heavy and very kind of just tired, not tired, just sluggish and cloudy headed and that kind of thing. And there was one point where every time I got some kind of symptom, I would get so caught up in my head about, well, which thing is it? You know, do I need to address something to do with the menopause? Should I be taking something for that? Is it to do with the adrenal stuff? Is it underactive thyroid? I just feel a bit, and then what do I? And so that created a lot more stress, because I was in this place of wanting to know and not knowing where the current symptom. And what I would say has dramatically changed about that is that I still do get some symptoms, in inverted commas, some feeling discomfort physically, not feeling as energetic as I might like, that kind of thing. But the first thing that doesn't happen now is I don't go into that crazy kind of trying to find what it is, or trying to think, oh, what did I eat yesterday and what do I need to do about that, and should I not eat that thing again, when I've eaten a whole range of things the previous day, and I could make up all sorts of stories about it being peppers or tomatoes or some other thing or whatever. So that's definitely a lot better, is that just not feeling like I need to know what it is. And that's taken a whole lot of busyness out of my life, really, thought busyness, that I don't have to know. And what I find happens then is that I'm present to my own body, and then what to do now occurs. So often for me, in the morning, it's getting up and moving. I know now that once I get up and move, I will feel better. So I'll usually do some kind of movement, a few weights, a bit of yoga, even just getting up and going to the loo and having a drink of water can so I think that's been really helpful for me to see that without this exploration in my head, not a real exploration about what it is, what is it today, you know, I can just navigate from the present moment.
And I would just love to step in there, because that's a really interesting thing that you've brought up. And I'm sure there'd be lots of people listening that can really feel what you're talking about. Like, they'll have experienced all of that kind of, oh my goodness, what is it? What's wrong? You know, what do I need to do? What made it happen? I mean, you probably know my story. Other people listening to this will know my story of around irritable bowel syndrome, and having the whole food thing of, oh my goodness, I ate something yesterday. What did I eat? What could I have eaten? This is happening today, so I must have done something yesterday. And like, the whole blame thing of, and trying to find the cause, which is an impossible task, right? Because who actually knows, like, really, when we look at it. But I'm curious to know, what was, because you went from doing all of that, trying to figure out what's going on, what have I done, what do I need to do, to not needing to know what was that. Like, I'm sure there'll be people listening like, what happened? How did you get from that to that? Because they seem like they're a big jump apart, I guess.
It's a really good question. I think, you know, the exploration that you and I are both on around the truth of how our experience is created, the 3 principles, that's definitely been. So I came across that in January 2020. And in January 2020, I was probably in the thick of functional medicine doctors and all that kind of stuff, and trying to find out how to make myself better, I think. So I think what's maybe fallen away, as I'm saying that, I think what's maybe fallen away is the idea that this thinky headspace place needs to do any of that, really. So a reigniting of the trust in my own body to resolve. So I don't need to know now, because it's okay, and it's sorting itself out. And maybe my body's going through some kind of sensitive phase at the moment, particularly when I think about the menopause. But it's okay. It's finding its way through, and I don't need to interfere by controlling lots of different things, lots of different factors in order to make that happen. There's no making it happen. It's just happening without me needing to do a lot about it. But also, I think through the exploration, just being much more present, like realizing that, yes, I could come up with 7 different things I did yesterday that caused this symptom today, and I must not do those things again. And that, like you said, that is just, we just don't know. I don't know if it's peppers or tomatoes that I ate yesterday. It just doesn't make sense to me anymore to even try to work it out. But then on the flip side of that, there is something also, as your mind gets quieter, that some things really do come through as making sense. So, for example, I get a bit of reflux now on a night. And I'm pretty sure if I eat really late at night, that does not help that. And I wake up with a sore throat, and I'm like, trying to clear my voice all the time because the burning is. So that makes sense. It makes more logical sense. And that with repeated action, because I feel like I can actually experiment with that. I can go, right, I'm eating at 8:00 and I'm going to bed at 9, and I've got, well, I eat at 6, stop eating at 6, go to bed at 9. Oh, no reflux. There's a place for experimentation, whereas with food, especially for me, because food's always been a thing in my life. I can't know from all that, unless I literally only ate one food yesterday. I can't know. That's something I really can't know. Whereas I can notice that I get a bit of reflux if I eat too late. So I think there's kind of a settling down, and then things almost like the truth emerges. Because I'm not in, it's yes, all these things about yesterday, it could be, and analyze them all. Then I'm yeah, actually, my body doesn't like it if I eat late, so I'm not going to do that. And I suppose if I put something in my mouth and had an instant reaction where my face inflamed, maybe I might, like some people do. Obviously, my fiance is a food safety manager, so he deals a lot with that kind of thing. People do have instant reactions to things. Then there's something that makes sense about not eating those things. But more and more, it's just much more. It's much smaller actions, it seems. Not, I've got to do an autoimmune protocol now because all these things, kind of thing. That makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And even when you were talking about it, what came to me was, and there's nothing wrong with doing those things, because that might be what makes sense in that moment. Like when you did that protocol, that made sense at that time to do that. And I've certainly done, my fair share of those kind of restricted diets. And at the time, it made sense to do that. And I guess the difference comes when it becomes stressful, or there's like a real tightness or a real stress or a real fear around that arises from that, which happened to me. It was like, so much thinking about food and how am I going to cope if I eat out, and oh my goodness, I've been invited to this party, I'm not going to be able to eat anything, I have to take my own food, and just all of the feeling of all of that was telling me maybe this isn't the right thing. There's another way. But when the idea arose to follow those protocols, that that was in that like your eating earlier thing made sense. And I guess at some point the eating earlier thing might not make sense anymore. And it's that responsiveness, isn't it? I think what I'm hearing in what you're saying and just reflecting on it is like there's a responsiveness that we can be led by, and that to me comes from a feeling, that it's that the feeling is the kind of thing that guides us. If something feels really tight and restrictive and fearful and scary, then that's probably not a helpful thing. But if it feels like exciting or full of possibility, then it is. And to kind of, and like I think you pointed to, tuning into the body, like stopping long enough, kind of coming into a space where you're actually present is so helpful, because then you can get a sense of what is going on, whether there's tightness or freedom from something.
Definitely. And I think it's, you know, seeing as well that our entire system, just like you said, the tightness, the stressful thinking, the feeling like, you know, that's not good for us. This mind-body system does not do as well. And, you know, your experience of IBS, mine of various autoimmune nonsense, all of that is made worse if the menopause definitely is made worse if we are stressed out about it and thinking there's a problem in everything that we're doing. And I think you can literally create the symptoms that way, definitely, by getting caught with something that looks like, you know, looks like there's a right way to do it as well. I think with all of these things like autoimmune protocols, and they're all very well-meaning, and I'm sure they've got, you know, they're purposeful in a way, but they do guide us away from kind of that in the moment. What's, you know, I try as much as possible now to think about what I might be guided to eat, rather than what's the right thing to eat according to. Because that's a never-ending rabbit hole, isn't it? What's the right thing to eat changes every other week in the
Yes.
press, doesn't it?
Yes.
What's the right thing to eat? And what I'm noticing as well is that my daughter said this to me, and it really struck me. She said because she's struggled with gluten for since she was very small. She was very bloated as a child, and when we took gluten out of her diet, her bloating seemed to go down. So she kind of doesn't buy it in, but if she's out and about, she kind of doesn't restrict it too much. But she did say to me one day, she said, "Mum, do you know what I've noticed?" She's so wise, my daughter. She said, "I've noticed that if I'm wound up about eating gluten and I don't think I should be having it, then I tend to have a reaction. And if I'm not, I don't." And you know what I thought?
Yeah.
God, she's right. And then we were at this event at the seaside at Scarborough, this kind of food festival, and we'd been watching these cooking demonstrations all day. And then the last guy made this focaccia bread, which just, we were in a marquee, so the smell of it was just too much. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to try this. So I had a little bit of it and I was absolutely fine. You know, it doesn't mean I'm going to go gorge on loaves of bread all the time, but, you know, I just thought, do you know what? I'm happy. I'm relaxed with Sophie. I'm just going to, and I really want to try it. It smells amazing. And I did. And it wasn't a problem. You know, I didn't feel ill or anything. Nothing happened, really, literally nothing. And I've had a few occasions recently where I've just had a bit of gluten and I've been absolutely fine. So it's, you know, it's so interesting to see this, to see how much the mind plays a part in our physical health. Because what I would say about my own journey, like over the last 4 years, as I've just started to feel better, I do feel a lot better, like physically, I feel a lot better. But what I see around that is that even we're even experiencing our own physical body through our thinking. We don't, that lens is still there, whether we're, you know, relating to the world out there in the physical world, or whether we're relating to our own physical symptoms. And I guess I can't know whether my symptoms have just gone away or reduced because I've healed in some way, or my body's got better, or I'm just relating to them differently.
Mm-hmm.
You know, maybe the same physiology is happening every morning, but my mornings are now better. You know, I do have mornings now where I wake up actually feeling like I'm okay, you know, which is you know, it's 8.5 years since the burnout. So, you know, nearly 9 years. So, who knows what's happened there? And I think that's like, almost like that's as big a question as, you know, how far does the universe expand in terms of stars and planets? You know, like when I sometimes think about that, I think, whoa, that's just so big. You can't even, I feel like there's this space between actually the physiology and our experience of the physiology. We can't know whether what's happened with the physiology or whether it's just how we're experiencing it. And that's quite cool, actually, because it kind of shows us just this massive potential for our experience of our physical body to be just completely different, even if it doesn't change that much, even if the physiology doesn't change that much, which is really cool.
I love what you're pointing to, that you can have some diagnosis, if you like, but the experience of that diagnosis can change. And we can, you know, I mean, we can't say that, we can't compare humans, obviously, because that's impossible. But we can see that one person has a diagnosis and how they deal with it, if you like, versus another person with that same diagnosis. And yes, the diagnosis doesn't mean that the symptoms are necessarily going to be the same within different individuals, but just that being able to see that the experience is changeable. And one of the things that I really love to explore around this is around pain. I'm blessed, if you like, with fairly regular headaches. And even that now is just a fascination for me of wow, like even pain, even the experience of pain can come and go. So whilst I can have a headache, I can wake up with a headache and kind of have that experience of, oh gosh, you know, this is going to be a challenging day. But as soon as I'm engaged in a conversation like this, for example, or I'm working with a client, that the experience of the pain disappears whilst I'm present with that person. And then when I come out of the call and come back into the room, if you like, there's an experience of pain. And just that, you know, being able to see that, and it comes back again to what you said about presence, that in this moment, without thought, without the interpreter, without the mind interpreting what this symptom is, there's just what is, I guess. Without the words, without the diagnosis, without the meaning, oh my goodness, I've got a headache, that's going to mean I'm not going to be able to function, I'm not going to be able to speak, you know, like all the things that we kind of have upon a diagnosis or a sensation. But without that, there just is the thing. I find that really fascinating, just playing around with that. And I love what you're pointing to of like, well, who knows, like I've been, maybe my body is the same, maybe it's experiencing the same stuff, but actually how it's interpreted is different. And that's mind-blowing.
Yeah, I love that, because I had a similar experience with headaches, which in the end I was told was a histamine intolerance, which had me on another rabbit hole of looking at foods and stuff. But actually, like you said, who was the physiology of the headache there all day? And like you say, I'd go into a call, I'd be chatting to somebody, I'd be, you know, doing whatever, and there would be no experience of a headache. And then, like you say, you suddenly finish doing what you're doing, you're less present, and then you're like into the story of the headache. But the other time I really saw this was, I used to have plantar fasciitis, which is it's like a tension under your foot, but it causes like a very sharp pain into your heel. It's often called runner's heel, but I got it from, I didn't run, but I used to do a lot of high impact cardio stuff, and I got it from that. And we were doing a lot of walking, and I love walking, but we set off on this walk one day, and we hadn't got very far from home, and the pain started in my heel, and then it would move kind of up into my knee and into my hip, because obviously as soon as you've got pain in one foot, your body starts to kind of, you know, rebalance and causes more pain. And I noticed, but I noticed very quickly on this particular, I don't notice these things all the time, but on this particular day, I noticed the story was, oh my God, this is a 9-mile walk. How are we going to do this? What are you going to do? We're going to have to turn around. You're not going to be able to do this. But I noticed this in my head. And I just stopped, and I held Bruce's hand, kind of just helped me anchor myself back into the present moment. I took a breath and I just went, you've just got to put one foot in front of the other. Like that was almost like that just happened inside my head. That was the little process I went through. And the pain disappeared almost instantly. It was like my mind, as soon as my mind felt a little twinge of it, it went, oh, how do we protect Claire? Right, I tell you what we need to tell her. She needs to go home. She can't possibly do it. Like it was like my mind went into a really protective space, bless it, but it wasn't real. We managed to do the long walk that we were planning to do, and I was absolutely fine. But really interesting to see how my mind had obviously decided that this was going to be a disaster for me, and it then went into its little protective chit chat. But it wasn't real. It wasn't. And it disappeared the minute I got myself back into the present moment.
That's amazing, isn't it? And I think particularly when because you had a diagnosis of something. So it's like the tiniest suggestion that thing might be there. Then in comes like your experience of just the whole story then of need to keep this body safe. Again, that the possibility of maybe the mind isn't always reliable.
You don't say, Vicky.
No. Maybe, just maybe.
I think it's mostly not reliable.
I love that. Love the, noticing of it and okay, well, let's just see what happens. And I think that's such a beautiful invitation for all of us. Is the mind makes stories up, never-ending stories. And what if they're not true?
Pretty sure they're not. The other place where I really saw this, the power of just being in the present moment and then navigating forward from there rather than looking into the past, was I actually had a while ago, Ankush Jain, who we both know, he ran a little women's group and I volunteered to be coach, and it was around weight and getting on the scales. I was getting on the scales every day at that point. And if the scales went up, that was me in analysis. What did I eat yesterday? Because it would often be, I'd often feel the bloating. I'd feel bloated, and then it would be like, I've got to be in the story of what I ate yesterday. And by the end of this session with Ankush, it was a little like 20-minute coaching session. I had my bathroom scales hidden in the attic. Bruce took them. I told him to take them, and he hid them in the attic. And I've just noticed, because I'm just like, well, what in the present moment makes sense to eat, and not with, again, this story of the past. The scales were pulling me into the past because they were giving, in my eyes, they were giving me information about what I'd eaten yesterday. And now to be much more present with, today, what makes sense? The next step, like on the walk, just the next step. With a headache, just the next step. Well, it might be that I just need to drink a bit more water, or, there might be something to do.
Or take paracetamol or whatever.
Whatever. Whatever. Yeah. But just, it's the more we can be just present with what's now, the whole unbelievable, ton of wisdom opens up to us, I think, in terms of what's the next thing to do that might be helpful. Because we don't want to all sit around with headaches all the time, or suffering, or whatever else. But there will be something, but it's not going to be something from the past. It's not going to be yesterday's stuff, really.
Yeah, and even when you were saying that, it's not going to be someone else's stuff either.
No.
So it comes back to the diets and the protocols and whatever that we innocently follow because somebody else tells us they work for them and they're working for other people. So it's so innocent to kind of pin all our hopes on, oh, well, that's the thing that's going to help me then. And I think what you're inviting people to is to listen to what is right for you from the present, from what does my body need right now in this moment. And it might be that protocol, it might be that diet, it might be whatever right in this moment, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be that in a week's time or even a day's time. But that beautiful invitation just to come back to, in the present, you're going to know right now, you're going to know what's right now for your body.
Definitely. And I think particularly around food for me, that's just got so much noise in it. I think it has for most people, but because like we said, the rules change every other week. What's good for us, what's not good for us. A lot of the rules were made up by marketeers anyway, so most of them are just complete rubbish. We've got a head full of that stuff to kind of navigate through. But yeah, when we just with our body and listening, observing, we can work that out for ourselves, I think.
Yeah, and it reminds me of, I always go back to this, but for those of us who've had children or have experienced children or been around children when they were very little, and that whole weaning process, moving kids off milk and onto solid food, and how they know what their body needs. Like if you watch them, there'll be days when, and it's really frustrating when you're a parent and you're there with your homemade purees or your really expensive little jars, and one day they'll eat it and the next day they won't. They're throwing it across the room. And I remember getting so frustrated about that. But I look back now and I think, wow, isn't that amazing? Like their bodies knew, not cheese today, but yes to broccoli. No broccoli today, but yes to apple. It's like built into us, but it's overridden by all the things we're taught and told about food and things that are good and things that are bad and what we should eat and what we shouldn't eat. And yeah, but when you go right back to children that don't have those rules, they can flick food away when they don't want it because they know that they don't need it. And for me, I always come back to that and think that's the invitation. What does my body want today? And it might be chocolate and it might be broccoli. And it's like, there's nothing right or wrong about that. But I think that where you come from when you alluded to this, if there was no fear around any of it, I wonder how the body would react then. I've often wondered, is a donut really bad? I mean, I know there's lots of science that says yes, it is. But how you eat the donut, are you eating it from fear of like, oh my gosh, I'm going to put on an extra stone now, I'm going to, I'm going to get really bloated, I'm going to, whatever, all these things are going to happen if I want to eat this? Or what happens if you eat it from joy and from like excitement and gratitude? What's the difference on the physiology of the body? I'm just so fascinated by that. But there's so much we can learn, like without all the rules, then what?
I remember Louise Hay, she's got a prayer, hasn't she? She used to say every time she ate, she would say this prayer about how whatever she put in her mouth was going to be blessed for her body and it was going to be absolutely perfect and right at this time. And so it was like a little meditation thing, prayer thing that she used to say. But the other thing is that, you're saying about little children, they did a study once where they got these, I think they were 2 or 3 year old children, a group of them. And in each home, these children were allowed to choose their food. Literally for 2 weeks, no adult guidance. And they were given options like, every option from sweets and, what we might call junk, right up to like vegetables and stuff. And of course, when they first started on this program, these kids were like, whoa, the sweets, But over the 2 weeks, they created a balanced diet themselves with no adult information. So that program, that underlying wisdom is inside all of us, like you say, but it's just, getting out of the way of the noise. I mean, the funniest one is, the breakfast is the best meal of the day. And my kids, just from being quite young, probably from starting high school, would not eat breakfast. And I used to be, oh, they need to eat breakfast, blah, blah. And then I found out it was actually invented by the American bacon industry and adopted by Kellogg's, who also thought it was a very good marketing message, and is actually rubbish. There's no nutritional evidence to say breakfast is the most important meal of the day. And yet, we're all bringing our kids. So breakfast clubs all around the school have been started with this basis that children should have breakfast. We all should have breakfast. So,
yeah, that's a whole nother conversation, isn't it? Even that, yes. And something that I'm really playing with is trying to just eat when I'm hungry, rather than the set, we have these set times of like, well, breakfast is between this time and this time, and lunch has to be between these hours, and dinner has to be between these. And what if it doesn't? What does that look like? What happens if you just eat when you actually want to eat, rather than at a time when you're supposed to eat? And there's just so much around food, isn't there?
I'm definitely in that space at the moment as well, of just like, am I actually hungry? Am I eating because I'm hungry? I'm eating because it's such and such o'clock and I better eat now? Or, I did the 16/8 fasting for ages. And now if I wake up and I'm hungry, I eat some breakfast. If I'm not hungry, I don't eat breakfast. Hunger, I think, is so important, and it is often either it's just a squash down sensation. I think it's covered up by our thinking.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Oh, I could talk to you for hours, but I think probably a great place to end. I just love the exploration that we've had in this, and just the possibility that we don't need to listen to the rules of the mind, and that we can come into presence and listen to what the body needs and wants in that moment.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure, Vicky. Thank you.
Thank you for coming on, and I will catch up with you soon.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you. Bye.
Bye.